everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of AMHIE on Air. So this week we're going to be talking a little bit about the upcoming Children's Mental Health Week, which is coming up in February. So the focus is going to be belonging this year, which is interesting, sort of tying in with current events around, mental health crises in schools and things that are happening with that, and also like the referral crisis that a lot of schools are going through at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a little go around the room, and you guys can introduce yourselves and do a little bit of a chat about what you've been doing recently. And then what we'll do is we'll crack on and fire over the first question. So let's start with you, Polly.
Oh, hi everybody, and thanks Lily for the invitation. My name's Polly Harrow. I've been assistant principal at Kirklees College for the last 12 years, and I am the Department of Education Student Support Champion for the further education sector. So I do find that an awful lot of work in the education sector is very school-centric, and that is wonderful and great, but I am here to represent the post-16 sector. Children are children to the age of 18, and I'm going to be talking from a college's point of view today.
Thanks very much, Polly. It's really interesting to have somebody from that sector as well, because I think we've been stuck with sort of primary and secondary for the first couple of episodes. So yeah, definitely pleased to have you on board with that voice. Let's move on to you, Amanda. Let's have a little bit of an intro from you.
Hi, I'm Amanda Collyer. I'm student support and wellbeing at the Howard of Effingham School. I've worked here now 17 years. It's always interesting. Every day is completely different. Part of the things that I'm working on at the moment is organising our third Wellbeing Festival, which doesn't quite tie in with the Mental Health Week, but we've got it in March because that was the earliest available date that everybody could do. So that's quite exciting, and we go from year 7 up to year 13 in school.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Amanda. That's exciting about the Wellbeing Festival. You'll have to tell me about that afterwards. Okay, and then we'll move on to you, Nic, as well.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nic Hooper, and I work for a multi-academy trust in Bristol. It's quite a special trust, really, in that it had visions for impacting the wellbeing and mental health of the community outside of the schools that were in the trust. And so I work for an outreach service that's situated within a multi-academy trust, and we work with local schools in the Bristol, South Gloss, North Somerset area with young people that are at risk of permanent exclusion from school, and young people that are often referred to as EBSO, or emotionally based school avoidant. So I'm a senior practitioner and the research lead for Enable Inclusion Trust, the Enable Inclusion team. And apart from that, I do lots of other bits and bobs, and the probably most important of which is a project called Connect. Connect is a wellbeing curriculum for primary school children between the age of 4 to 11 to be delivered by teachers, and we're about to launch it for free. So it's a big sort of part of the process for us, and I'm happy to be here talking to everyone.
Thanks very much, Nic. Yeah, we're excited about the launch. Yeah, if anyone wants to have a look, Nic actually has a blog feature up on our blog page on amhie.com. So yeah, if you wanted to have a look, you can see what he's writing about. Okay, so let's crack on with question number 1, or area number 1, that we're going to talk about today. So belonging at school is the focus for Children's Mental Health Week this year in 2026. So what does a sense of belonging look like for children, and how do you feel that schools and communities can help every child feel included? So we'll start with you, Nic.
Oh, brilliant. I'm glad you've come to me first. I was hoping that everybody else would give their wonderful answers, and then I would just say, yeah, what they said. It's difficult. So like when I go into the schools to work with the kids that we work with, we see sort of like belongingness everywhere. We see the word belongingness. I know that people are having like belongingness seminars and belongingness trainings and this, that, and the other. And I've always had the question, which is like, what's meant? What do we mean by the word belongingness, in schools? And I think that, at least as I try to answer that question, it has a lot to do with human relationships. with the idea of feeling safe and settled within a particular context as a result of the safety of the relationships that are around us. And so the question then, I think, becomes like, how do schools create a context for nourishing relationships between, you know, students and between staff and students, and stuff. And so I think that, you know, relative to me coming and saying I would do X, Y, and Z, sort of a bigger focus or a broader picture thing would be, for me, would be that if I'm running a school, I am trying my best to do two things. I'm trying my best to create a context that brings people together. Now that could be anything, right? It could be we're going to go to a climbing center together. It could be we're going to have an Olympics day. It could be we're going to do speed dating or something, you know, anything like that brings people together with, I think, enhance relationships. And as you enhance relationships, I think belongingness sort of goes up. But I think there's something else that goes on with belongingness as well, which is sometimes I think that we assume that we as the adults, we create the contexts that allow relationships to flourish, but we sometimes underestimate how equipped young people are to build friendships in and of themselves. And so I think that there's something to be said for teaching young people how to build friendships and having them think about what good friendships look like and having them aim for that. And so I could talk all day about like relationships and stuff, like, you know, have you heard of the Harvard happiness study? Heard of that study?
Harvard happiness. I don't know. Not myself. How about you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a cool study, and they basically, I'll tell you quickly about it. They collected data from the same people every 2 years or something since about 1930, and they came out with their landmark finding in 2000s, which is that human relationships and good quality human relationships are the biggest predictor of good psychological health and well-being. And so it makes sense to make belongingness and relationships like a focal point within schools. Some of the young people that I work with, they sometimes forget that they have agency in their relationships to make those relationships more of what they want. And so I think like a lot of the young people that I work with, they spend so long either being worried about other people's responses when they try to initiate sort of good relationships or contact, and they've got anxiety about that, and then you've got to have a conversation about anxiety, or they'll think, well, I can't control their behavior, other people's behavior, and so I'm not going to bother even trying. And so like trying to help young people to sort of see that they've got agency in their relationships, they can show up in their relationships in a way that might take those relationships closer to what they want, is a big skill that will help them to build friendships, that will help them to relate to people more functionally in their environment, and that then will help them to have this sense of belonging, this sense of safety within their context that they find themselves in. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I'm definitely not.
Would you say, Polly, that you think that sort of, you agree with that, what Nic's saying in your context, sort of in like the higher education sort of sector? Is that still true, or are they moving away a little bit more from that kind of safety aspect and a little bit more into like, you know, building relationships within their peer groups?
Yeah, there's a lot in there. So I'll start by saying, so I'm a trauma-informed and restorative national practitioner. And so my work is absolutely based on relational driving connection, building trust, but it's also based on the development of the children's brain. And we keep saying school, I'm going to keep on saying and colleges. We've got children in college, you know, the prefrontal cortex, your rational thinking, abstract learning brain here is not fully developed till late 20s, early 30s. Our children are completely dominated by their limbic system, their emotional brain. And so when we talk about, everyone's talking about belonging, and it would be, and it's imperative at the 16 to 19, and in fact older, for humans generally. So belonging for me is psychological and emotional safety for children. And what educators really are surprised by, a lot of them, is understanding the inability to learn when you are in an escalated, heightened state. So when your emotional brain is looking for danger, you know, and risk and pleasure, I have to say, and thrill seeking, but always on the lookout. People who have traumatic lived experience, children with traumatic lived experience, have got layer upon layer upon layer of memory. They in their brain. That's the brain is like a filing system, and they think they can predict what's going to happen next, depending on what has already happened to them. So they're looking for danger and might see danger just because you've walked into a room and you're an adult. So we inadvertently can trigger children into a high stress response where no learning can take place because of our body language, because of the way we speak to them. I do an awful lot of young people's voice feedback. You know, the thing that comes up time and time again. What would you like me to tell educators? Don't use sarcasm. It hurts. When I tell it's not funny, we don't like it. And when I tell educators that the real meaning of the word sarcasm is to rip flesh like a dog, do you want to do that? Is that what you want to do? So it to chime with what Nic's been saying, real belonging is when I know that I'm not going to be shamed. I'm already carrying a load. You know, everyone has a story. Yeah, everybody's got a story. You don't have to know the details of the story to treat people. Be kind, be human, be harmless, have empathy, have respect. So I think that when children come into all sorts of settings, they can immediately feel quite discombobulated. And that emotional and psychological safety, I'm not going to be embarrassed, I'm not going to be shamed, I'm not going to be isolated. The fact that academies have isolation booths is, for me, a crime. When you take children away from their peer group and isolate them, especially children who have had traumatic lived experience, and remember, trauma isn't what's happened, it's the impact it has on the individual, which can be unique. And you know, I just think it's appalling. And I know that you're going to ask a question about attendance, and I'll come back to it there. But children need to be seen and valued and heard and respected. But you know what? They need to be loved. Am I safe? Am I loved? Then I'm in a position to learn. And I'm going to say, Lily, you can edit me after. There are people in education who don't like children. And that is an issue. We have to have people. You don't love your students, and you can't know someone. You can't love someone unless you get to know them, and you can't know them unless you're curious about them. So I'm going to finish this little bit. Nic and I think, could really we could chat forever. All behaviour communicates a need. All behaviour is communicating a need, and our job is to be curious about what is driving that behaviour. As if we keep saying, right, you've done something bad, so you're a bad person. That makes you a bad person, and we're going to punish you for that bad thing. We need to be curious about what's driving that behaviour, and people who love you and care about you and are really interested in your holistic development educationally as well. You're an emotional, available adult, no matter what you teach. It's not safeguarding's job. It's not pastoral's job. It's not the specially trained. It's your job, the maths teacher's job, and the construction teacher's job, and the English teacher's job. And once we take as a core skill being human and being harmless and being kind, and regulating ourselves as role models in every, you know, this is, in my view, the responsibility of an educator. We can create that window of tolerance, that's psychological and emotional safety. So my brain is regulated, I'm not on the lookout for risk and danger all the time. I am calm, I'm integrated, and I can then learn. Now, lastly, I promise, loads of children go to school and college and university feeling safe and feeling loved. And we know who they are. I'm not talking about those kids. I'm talking about the ones that deserve the same opportunities, but do not feel safe and do not feel loved. And we have, in my view, a duty of care to create the environment. Belonging is not an ID badge. It's not barbed wire round you. It's not security. It's not police, whatever. And it's certainly not isolation booths. It's emotional, available adults, but acting with empathy based on relational practice.
I totally agree with you, Polly. I couldn't agree with you more. Definitely not getting that edited out, I promise. Nick, I must apologise. I accidentally cut you off there. You were mid-flow. I thought you'd finished. I'm so sorry. Right, Amanda, like what are your thoughts on belonging?
Yeah.
Do you agree with what Nick and Polly have said? Or?
Absolutely, and it is very much about that window of tolerance. It is for educators to absolutely know their students, not just know their students needs, be like you said, Polly, about being curious, knowing what's going on in that student's life. And it shouldn't actually be down to the student to have to remind an educator of sort of like, I've got this going on, or I have this need, or I've got the wrong coloured paper, so I can't actually access what's going on in class as well. It's about, and I get it, for educators, sometimes there are a lot of different changes that they need to make for different students, but every student has that capacity to learn, and that has the right to learn, has the right to those reasonable adjustments to be made, so that they do feel included, they do feel a sense of belonging, because actually they know that when they're going to go into that classroom or anywhere within school, or when there's a school visit, their needs been taken into account of. The student that might be invited on an off-site visit, but actually sometimes needs a wheelchair, but their wheelchair is not going to be accessible on that visit. Is there an all-terrain wheelchair that you can hire or get for them, or that actually the centre that you're going to has? So actually, if you get all of those things right, and your students, they are going to feel really safe, they are going to feel comfortable, they're going to be feeling comfortable within the classroom, but actually they're also going to feel really comfortable in coming to speak to those adults, because they know that those adults are really going to listen and really take notice of them, and actually are going to want to look at a plan of, well, actually, how can we make this work for you? Because quite a lot of the time we feel, well, actually, that student we can't teach because they're just disrupting the class and they get sent out all of the time. And then actually, if you look at the needs of that student, I had one the other day and spends most of their life outside of the classroom. However, we have a buddy room, so it's a bit like a support centre, and the student had headphones in classes. They're not allowed to listen to music, so I said, does music help? Putting your headphones in help? Don't know, I've never really tried it. I've never been allowed to. Give it a go. Am I allowed? Yeah, give it a go. It was amazing. Totally focused, locked into the work, could have a decent conversation. There was no shouting out, there was no interrupting anybody else. That window had been completely opened from that young person just by making a small adjustment. So we're trying to get that put in place across the rest of the lessons as well. But it is about what works for that student. Some students need to be doing more than one thing. They have that type of brain that's kind of really busy, that they need more than one thing going on. And if we don't actually know them, then it is really sad that some of the students are being let down in that way. The other thing, we try and have a sense of belonging by different activities during the year that the students can do, Wellbeing Festival being one. And we have, I think I've got 33 organisations coming in this year, but every student within the school has a timetabled slot. We've got 1,500 students, and they will go down and they will be able to go around all of the stores, the places that they feel are accessible to them, speak to the people behind the organisations, which are the ones that we promote within school as well. But actually we find that once they've seen those adults, they're more comfortable in accessing and being more proactive at accessing maybe the things for their mental health when we're not available, when school's closed. And then we have different programs that we run within school as well, which I'll go on to a bit later. But yeah, it's really important that students feel that there is a belonging and they feel safe. If they don't feel safe, as Polly said, they're not going to learn.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, I was at the vet conference on Friday, and one of the speakers there, she was the superintendent for schools in New York, and she was presenting, exactly what Polly was talking about, love. She was saying, if you don't love your students, then you can't offer the right kind of support, because all you're doing then is you're not giving them that sense of belonging. And I think you've all mentioned it, actually. I mean, Nic certainly talked about it a bit at the beginning, and understanding. So I think that's kind of key, isn't it, really? That's an established baseline for where you need to be, kind of to help people's that under your care at school. So can we sort of talk a little bit about kind of the mental health difficulty side of things? So I know we spoke a little bit before we started recording as well, but we've got that kind of mental health crisis at that point at the moment. A lot of students experiencing mental health difficulties. So what do you think, Amanda, in your experience, makes a good sort of, or better and more effective school-based mental health support system?
Yeah, and I think you're right. There absolutely is a crisis. There are so many long waiting lists, and some of the pathways for diagnosis have been closed, and all sorts of things happen. Within our trust, we try and make sure that we have as many mental health first aiders as we can possibly have. So I actually train mental health first aid for the trust, and as well as training our staff, we train our sixth formers as well. So within school, there is a rota, so every single hour of the school day, there is a mental health first aider who is on call that any student can access, and they're all based within one room, so they just take it in turns to be in there. And that we found really, really helpful as well, certainly with our sixth formers, because some of our students prefer talking to younger people, and they are more open with those people. So within that system, we've got something on hand all the time. But we also looked at other things that we can do. So we've teamed up with various organisations. One of the things we've put in is the STEM for Clear Fear app. Now, again, we know that students can't use their phones during the school day. However, if they do come up to the buddy room and we think that is appropriate, they can use the app. But again, it's something they can use outside of school when school is closed, and it's a CBT based program. We also have programs that we have every single day of the school day within our support room based around anxiety and stress. And it's all CBT, DBT based. We do reading for wellbeing, and every single day there is a different program, and every resource that we use is ASD, ADHD, PDA, dyslexia friendly. So it doesn't matter who we've got in the room, they can access the resources that are being used. And that actually builds a really good relationship with the pastoral team who run that room, as well as the year teams, and it really embeds that safe space. But what the students do is they build up a book of resources, and they can access that at any time during the school day. So I think it's important that schools sort of they're sort of proactive rather than firefighting. We wait for something to happen and then we firefight with it. If we're proactive, what we have found is our crisis situations have actually reduced quite a bit over the year, because students have built up that knowledge of things that they can do to help themselves, as well as accessing others when maybe that doesn't work for them.
Oh, yeah, no, that's really interesting. Talking about sort of the firefighting response over kind of like, system-wide whole school approaches. I mean, obviously we know that that's the kind of guidance that the DfE is saying, you want that whole school approach. So Nic, I know that you're sort of not quite boots on the ground as much with your role in terms of being in the schools from what you were describing earlier, but like what in your experience is like a good, effective mental health support?
So I work with kids in the schools, but we also do supervision for pastoral care teams within schools as well. So like the student-facing teams will go to and try and help with their young people, help them formulate, help them think about what intervention might look like. And so I spend lots of time in schools and can sort of see some of the things that are going on. So in some ways, I want to rewind and talk about where to start this, right? So when I go into schools, what I see is lots of different things. So I think like love like Prince William and other such celebrities, like over the past 10 years, mental health awareness has gone up. Right. And so as a result of that, what you like to think is the stigma has gone down, mental health stigma has gone down, mental health awareness has gone up. And I can't help but like refer to a study that was done in Australia whereby they taught kids in schools about depression in a course, and they measured depression at pre-intervention, they measured depression at post-intervention, and what they found was that teaching the kids about depression increased levels of depression. More kids identified as being depressed as a result of being taught about what depression is. And that's sometimes the problem with mental health awareness strategies, is making people more aware of the fact that people in the world have thoughts and feelings aren't very nice, doesn't tell them anything about what to do with those thoughts and feelings. So mental health awareness by itself isn't going to be enough. Something else has to happen afterwards, right? So then you go into schools, and what you find is you find a little bit of CBT. Now, CBT has ideas about what to do with thoughts and feelings, which is find evidence that goes against them so you can change your thoughts and feelings, roughly. And then in the same school, then you'll see some mindfulness. You'll be like, well, mindfulness has got different ideas, actually sometimes contrary ideas about what to do with thoughts and feelings. And then you get acceptance-based stuff, which is just accept your thoughts and feelings and, you know, keep doing things that are important to you. That's a different idea about what to do with thoughts and feelings. And so I think that the major thing that I see when I go into schools that is probably something to think about is to have a unified strategy or a unified approach or a unified language or a unified understanding for when we get thoughts and feelings that we don't like, what do we do with them? How do we respond to thoughts and feelings that we don't like? And that's often what I don't see. I basically see a load of stuff thrown out there, whether they're like, I don't know, golden retrievers in schools, whether it's like nature, there's just a load, there's almost like a recipe book of mental health intervention within schools, but there's not a lot of thought about whether they're all in agreement with each other, all those different types of approaches. And so I think like having more of a consistent approach within schools would probably matter, and that would, you know, require some looking into the evidence bases for the different ideas, different approaches for what to do with thoughts and with feelings. And then I think like supporting staff to be able to talk the language of that particular approach. And so like take me, for example, right? So I specialize in a therapy called ACT. It comes from the perspective that thoughts and feelings that aren't very nice are part of what it is to be human. Why? Because life is difficult and we've got language, and language allows us to compare and contrast and do a bunch of things that aren't particularly useful. And what that means actually is that suffering, the symptoms of mental health problems, thoughts and feelings that aren't very nice, they're part of what it is to be a human being. And the problem isn't their presence. The problem is when they come along, we try our best not to have them. And the things that we do to try not to have thoughts and feelings that aren't very nice, that's a problem, because that involves alcohol or gambling or like staying in our room or not, you know, not doing things that make a life work. And so part of the approach is all about helping young people to see that they can have thoughts and feelings that aren't very nice and still do things that will nourish their lives and still do things that will make their lives bigger. And so like when we go into secondary schools, we basically need every member of staff to be singing from that same hymn sheet, to be speaking the same perspective, which is when a kid's got anxiety and, you know, saying, I feel anxious, go, yeah, you know, people feel anxious a lot, especially if they're a little bit scared. And with you, I can see you're anxious about going into class. And I think that makes sense. Why? Because you were bullied in the past. I know you were bullied in the past. And so that's a bit of a scary thing. But I also know that if you keep avoiding the class, you're not going to be an engineer. And I know you really want to be an engineer at some point. So we've got to figure something out in this space. You need every teacher to be understanding of this is our approach, and to know how to speak it in conversation, which involves resource. It involves getting people in to be able to train those teachers and teach them the language. In some ways, especially if you look at the research across different psychological approaches, most psychological approaches have got a decent evidence base. It doesn't even matter sometimes what approach you go for, just that you go for an approach, a consistent framework, a consistent language for how to interact with kids, so that you're sending them consistent messages about when you get thoughts and feelings you don't like, this is why they're there, and this is what you can do. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes,
it's worth saying. So, if you give me 2 seconds, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think that's a really hard thing to do. And so with some of the schools that we work with now, I've said things like this: if I could get rid of all the school psychologists in the world and just take that resource and tell those schools, invest in friendship networks for your kids, invest in their social relationships, I think I would do that, because I think that's actually an easier thing. Even with intervention these days, a lot of the time I'm starting with, tell me about your friends, tell me about your family. Let's figure out that. And actually, sometimes when you sort that out, everything else sort of falls into place. And apart from that, I'm saying to the schools, look, stay away from the psychological mumbo jumbo, all the different approaches. Go for the 6 ways to wellbeing. Tell your kids, if they want to be psychologically healthy, they need to exercise, they need to connect with people, they need to challenge themselves, embrace the moment, self-care, and give to others. Those are the behaviors of psychologically healthy people. Get your kids to do those things more. And so I think there's almost levels with it. And I think the lowest level is you get kids to engage in useful wellbeing behaviors that are likely to nourish them. And then after that, you need some sort of common language for what to do with thoughts and feelings. I'm going to stop talking. I'll talk for ages.
That's brilliant, Nic. Thank you. And Polly, Nic's talked about a lot of different approaches there, because extensive experience of lots of different things. Do you employ any of that within your trust and what you're doing, or do you have a completely different approach?
Yeah, I'm not affiliated with a trust, and I never will be. Can I just be very clear about that?
I'm so sorry.
Post 16 further education, and I certainly wouldn't ever have anything to do with anybody who had isolation booths anywhere near any of their children. So I think that was really interesting. I'd like to kind of go back to, I was doing some research recently, and it was very interesting about children who have much more interaction with nature. I'm saying this because Nic brought nature up. Had much higher levels of well-being than those children in struggling with poverty and deprivation, who really don't get any access or much access to nature at all. And if you believe nature is a healer, which I do, it's really interesting as you go through the school evolution that you have all sorts of places to play. See, we take play away from children. They're allowed to play when they're little, and then as they get older, they can't play anymore. And then there's no play, and then there's no green spaces in schools either. And by the time you get to secondary school, the pitches are really for the sporty kids. And actually, and then in colleges, we don't have green spaces at all, and there's very little play. And I think that's really unfortunate. But I wanted to go back a step, really resonating with what Nic's been saying. I do believe wholeheartedly that everyone in the organisation has a role to play. And I passionately disagree with this. It's somebody else's job. But that is the world that we're in. If everybody makes sure that every individual feels welcomed and wanted, you're going to complete, greeting children at the classroom door and just saying, hello, hi, how are you? Calling people by their name, for instance, which is the only label we should give to a child, decreases the chances of something escalating in the classroom. Talking to children, students, pupils in corridors, interacting in that way. And I think we are all then benefiting we've all got mental health. Remember, we've all got mental health. So we want to really maximize mental well-being. And we can do that by welcoming. And it doesn't matter what, there's so much unconscious bias about what we look like, what we sound like, you know, what colour we are, what hair we've got, with what we're wearing, if we smell, if we don't smell, you know, if we're tall and we've got acne, if we're not, and so on and so on. And we, and I'm going off with Nic here off into the cosmos, but the fact is it's so disappointing that as a society we're not a bit more we haven't got to grips with that. But I want to come back to something Amanda said, but only out of interest in this idea, and I know this is not what you were saying, Amanda, but these children who are kicked out of classrooms, what on earth is that about? What you're telling me is that you cannot manage the behaviour in your classroom. What that tells me, and I can tell you, sorry to be strident, but I'm matching Nic's energy, I think, here, but the fact is, you won't be able to manage someone's behaviour if you haven't got a relationship with that person. And if you've got a relationship with that person, they're not going to kick off with you half as often as they will if they think you don't care, you don't like them, or whatever it is. So every time that you send a child out of a classroom, you are telling that child you cannot cope with them. You are telling them they are not manageable. You are adding to their mental unwellness in doing that. And one thing about educators is the way that you speak to a child gives everyone who can hear permission to speak to the child that way. So when you are, oh yeah, really, oh you again, Polly, out you go, you give the whole group permission to isolate that child, to ridicule that child, to disrespect that child. My question is, so we've had the kind of utopia that Nic's talked about where everybody actually knows what they're doing and they're doing it. And I'm saying, why are you in a classroom with children you can't even manage? Why are you sending children out of a classroom, giving them the message that they have to be abandoned, rejected, kicked out? They clearly do not feel emotionally and psychologically safe, and you clearly are not an emotional, available adult. When I do my training across education, which I do most days, the thing that I get most of all in the feedback is, why didn't I get this before I started teaching? And if I'd had this training before I started teaching, I would completely change my practice. And from this day, I can change my practice. So it is really appalling that we're not giving teachers all the tools they need by in initial teacher training, not covering these essential topics. Can I just add something, Lily, as well, which is the importance of praising effort. That it's so important to praise effort. And what I find a lot in my years of working with educators is this notion, and I see it with people, you know, with their children and with their grandchildren, people saying, oh, you're brilliant at that. You're fantastic at that. How amazing are you? You're going to absolutely skip this one. And what that means is that that child, the minute they find something difficult, will give in. We want to build this resilience. I can't stand that term, and I wish staff were a bit more resilient, but this notion that we say, oh, you're a natural, you're a genius, this is fantastic, look at that, you see, it's brilliant. You should always reward effort. You've worked really hard. I don't care if it's 2 + 2 = 4 and they're 40. You've worked really hard to work that out. And what that means is they will understand that working hard and effort is where they need to be. And they won't be ashamed when they falter, and they can't admit to you that they can't do it because you think they're a genius and they don't want to, you know, fall down in your eyes. Is that making sense? It's really important that we reward effort and we talk about effort. But I do really think in terms of this, the anxiety, you know, name it to tame it. You know, I've had young girls coming in and they say, I can't go in the classroom, and they're crying, and I say, but you got here. They got here, they've come, they're in the building, and you go, you look amazing, or you are a union, whatever it is, you know, and we need to put boundaries around children who go to the places where they know it's a soft, easy, I don't mean soft in the wrong way there, it's a safe place to be. It's incredibly, it takes an awful lot of courage and bravery to walk into a classroom late. And that is why you will find a child lurking over there doing anything but going into that classroom late, especially when it's not their own fault that they are late. So it's really just a question, I think, of doing exactly what Nic's suggested, which is everybody understand that the culture is one of warmly welcoming and wanting every child in this place. And when we talk about I talk about induction, you know, we do this ice breaking stuff for induction, and children getting to know, they hate it. They hate it, and the staff hate it. And we also give them a maths and English test, you know, as soon as they walk through the door. Watch Inside Out with them, chew the fat, get to know them. Let them get to know you, build that relationship in that precious first couple of days, and you will find the behaviour. And I know we're going to come to attendance and stuff, which is, I can't wait. But everybody, you can't go to maths and have a completely different experience than you do when you go to science, or you do when you go to English, because your English teacher's on this page and your maths teacher isn't, you know, and this idea that your class is completely disrupted and children have to leave, I think is to do with the teacher. Myself, that's, I can't be soft, you know, I can't pretend that I don't feel strongly about that. Sorry.
I mean, I definitely would agree with you, and I'll tell you why. I've literally experienced that firsthand when I was a child. So one of the reasons I'm so terrible at maths now is because the person that was teaching me maths, everything that you've just described, sending children out of the classroom, not supporting, also, you know, not hearing me when I said I didn't understand her. She just refused to believe it. Everybody else understands. Well, they didn't, you know, it was a very disrupted class. And I got, you know, very good grades for my GCSEs apart from maths. Maths was down here and everything else was up here. And it was because of her. And she was absolutely awful. So, you know, like, I can agree with it because I've experienced it. And I'm sure, you know, I mean, I'm 40 now. So, gosh, when I was at school, what was it, like 30 years ago? You know, it's been going on for a while. It's something.
But like we said at the beginning, that's very much down to the teachers being that curious and getting to know those child's needs and everything else. And that doesn't always happen across every school, as you said. And yeah, you're right. There needs to be a lot more training put in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll move on because I'm very aware that we're running a little low on time. Yes.
Just one very quick thing to do with what Nic and Amanda have said. You know, it doesn't matter. You can do as much training as you like, but there is no magic wand that will give you the confidence and competence to talk about feelings, emotions, risk, knife crime, sex, misogyny, you know, whatever it is that we're talking about. Sometimes you've just got to recruit to some very core skills that some people just simply don't have.
It's hard to draw from those skills if you're not someone who finds that easy as well. So yeah, so we'll move on to the final question. I'm going to talk to you again, Nic, because I'm still feeling guilty about how I cut you off. So we're talking about the correlation between mental health and school attendance. Polly's very excited about this question. How can schools, families, and communities work together to address this need?
Good question. But I want to go backwards because Polly was talking for ages there, and the alarm bells were just, you know, sort of. My brain was alight, sort of thing.
Oh, fizzy brain. I think, love it.
Yeah, I think so. I think I just want to touch on two things. One is when I worked in university for a really long time, and you get the two profiles of kids. You get the kids the kids that tie their sense of worth to the marks they get, and you get the kids that tie their sense of worth to how they show up as a human being. There's that book, isn't there, with Charlie Maxey, like The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, and there's a line in it, like the mole says to the boy, what do you want to be when you grow up? The boy's like, kind. Like, wow, we don't expect that answer from our kids. We expect flipping be a movie star or drive fast cars, and then when we go along with that, we basically make those outcomes what the kid needs to achieve in order to feel a sense of success or sense of worth relative to if you work hard and you're kind and you're compassionate and you're patient and you're good with people, you know, you're nice to people and stuff. That's a measure of you. That allows you to sleep at peace at night. Those kids, they fly through their degrees because they don't tie their sense of worth to their success. They tie it to how they show up. And it's such an important thing that gets lost on so many people. But with respect to teacher training, I would love in teacher training for teachers to be taught what we call it the ABCs of human behavior. Because once you're able to do an ABC analysis, you can see what the behavior is communicating. So like all behavior makes sense, right? So I had like this one young lad, a teacher that he didn't like, this was the first step, would ask him to go into a class with 30 kids. In the past, he's been bullied by some of those kids. He tells the teacher, F off. The teacher says, you're suspended. The short-term consequence of that is the kid gets to go home and play on his PlayStation. So like, are you really expecting a change in behavior if that's the chain of events? No, the kid's getting what he wants. He's getting to escape. So like what that tells me is there's something aversive about that context for that young person that we need to unpack and we need to explore, sort of thing. So like having people understand, right, okay, let's figure out what exactly. I had another kid who like every time he reached a maths question he couldn't do would throw a chair across the room. And then you're like, okay, so what does that tell us about what's going on here? Well, it tells us the kid has got like really, you know, quite deep stories about not being very smart. And every time he touches him, he just reacts. Okay, good, right. Now that we know that, we can do something about it. And so just like having people do a little bit better at figuring out the needs and figuring out the function of behavior, I would love teachers to do that, because I think I had a teacher once come to me and say, this kid in my class is getting out of the seat all the time. I was like, what happened before? He was like, oh, we do English. Okay, cool. So the kid doesn't like English. Right, cool. Okay, what do you do as he gets out of his seat? I go and give him a hug. Okay, the behavior is not going to change then, because the consequence is repetitive. It's reinforcing the behavior. We need to think about something else that can happen here that might alter the rate of behavior. And so I would love teachers to have that. Anyhow, I'm going to go back to attendance, which is basically, I'm the wrong person to ask about this, because I'll happily take my kid out of school to go on a holiday. And I think the reason for that is that within my work, we don't measure success according to activities, we measure it according to outcome. So a lot of the time when like we get commissioned, it's like, how many hours are you going to work with the kids? And do those amount of hours justify the amount of resource we're going to give you? We don't say that. We say, no, we're going to measure their well-being. And it might take 2 sessions, it might take 5 sessions, it might take 10 sessions. And so with my lads, for example, I've got a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old. I know the data, by the way, on attendance and like school outcomes and well-being and this sort of stuff. And it's way less reliable than what people think. And there's a load of nuance there that gets lost in like the general messages that get sent out into to the public. From my perspective, if my lad is functioning academically at the level that he should be and can be, and is engaging in school, then I'm happy to take him out of school and go on holiday with him. And so that might be like a provocative position to take, especially from the perspective of a psychologist, but as an informed position, a position that is linked to a bunch of research that I've read over the past sort of like 10 years and stuff. I think that there needs to be like more nuance in that conversation relative to just like black and white rules that are sent out there. I'm going to stop talking because I talk for ages. So go on to someone else.
I love you talking. You're talking very interesting and very nuanced and very informed information coming through there. So anyway, we'll move on. We better have, because we're running out of time. Amanda, let's hear from you about your experiences.
Yeah, and I think sort of mirroring what Nic says, it's the bane of my life. I hate it because you have these young people who, yeah, they have had all sorts of things happening in their lives, and school is not, they're either unable to access it or they've had so many traumas affected them from school. and we're expected to wave this magic wand just to get them back in. And going back to kind of one of the points before is nature. So we're really lucky. I managed to get a joint project with one of our national heritage sites. So every Monday I have access to an entire site. So it could be to do one-to-ones to meet a student for the first time. It could be going and doing some work in the woods. It could be sitting around a campfire with a group of students. And that is accessible. We offer any of our students who, as we know, are classed as EBSNA. But kind of from like the first week, as soon as I see, sorry, my phone's ringing, but I can't switch it off. As soon as I see that we have had a student out and it's to do with a mental health issue or anxiety, or just not wanting to come to school, the first thing I do will be to offer that appointment, but away from school, away from somewhere that's going to cause them even bigger anxiety, and to start building up that rapport with the parents, with the student, and listen to the parents. The parents are with that student or with their child 24/7. They know them way better than we do within school. And it's really important to hear that backstory, to hear the struggles that maybe the parent has, to hear the concerns and the fears that parent has, so that we can all work together. My aim is that it's never going to be, oh, I'm going to meet you now and you're going to be back in school next week. But we do a series of programs. Say I've only got the site for a Monday, which it's amazing. And build up their well-being, build up their self-esteem, get them to actually feel good about themselves. When they're there, then you can actually start exploring about what's going on in school. And when you start exploring what's going on in school, then you might be able to start in some of the quick fixes. And then, as you say, it is building, that, I hate that word, resilience, but it is building that, anxiety is normal. These are the things that we can do. If we get over that anxiety hill, it starts to go down because actually nothing bad happens. But actually, if they've been in a situation where something bad has happened, it's really hard to crack that. So it's about maybe building that up really slowly, but always doing it at the student's pace. But that well-being is essential to get there first, and I will always do it outside in nature unless it's really teeming down, and then I will use the building. But to go into, I have kids going and talking to the sheep. We love going and talking to the sheep because they don't give any judgment. They will come over and listen, which is really great. For some of our students, that's all they need.
Yeah, loving the nature and well-being. Like I spend a lot of time outside looking after horses. It does help. It helps a lot. So last but by no means least, Polly, what are your thoughts on school, families and community work in terms
going
of
to be
attendance?
really, Nic has time shamed himself and me. You haven't talked too much. What you have said is really worth hearing, and I hope that you feel the same about me. But I will be very brief. There is no such thing as a school refuser. There are schools that have policies and strategies that do not warmly welcome and want and make adjustments for the child, so the child feels wanted, that they belong, and that they want to be in that organisation. Anna Maxwell Martin has just released something which is well worth checking out. She's talking about attendance at school. Her own child does not attend school. I think punishing a low attendance is a crime. And I think celebrating 100% attendance is lovely for those children who've got 100% attendance. How do you think that makes the other children feel? And if I have been taken out of school on holiday because my dad is Nic and he knows that I'm going to learn more, as my own daughter did, by 3 weeks in Thailand than 3 weeks in the school, I'm sorry, with respect, that was before we got fined for doing such interesting things. But if I've had an accident, if I've been in hospital, if I've had a bereavement, if I've moved house and I haven't got in, I am not responsible for that. I am not a piece of data I am not a number with a percentage at the end of it. I am a name. And just to celebrate 100% attendance, which a lot of schools do and some colleges do, I think is an extraordinary lack of empathy and insight and understanding.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you, for agreeing to meet with me today and for being on AMHIE On Air episode 3. Has anyone got anything else to add? We're happy? Yeah, lovely. No, thank you very much, all of you. And we will see you next time for AMHIE On Air episode 2. 4? 4. We've done episode 2. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you so much.